even there are certain companies which have more data and they need to do more, okay, with that data to compete in this world.
Today, we will look into the operational backbone of data centers of excellence.
One is the size of the company, right? That brings in complexity. Then multi-location companies bring in more complexity. Multi-country companies bring more complexity. Then business line companies bring in even more complexity. So you have different layers of complexity in the company.
One interesting tension often in data center of excellence is whether to focus on standardization or whether to focus on innovation, right? And, so in your opinion, like leading organizations, how do they balance between these two, right?
So some amount of standardization has to be brought in, and how your report should be, and also it helps if you have a standardization, then integration of data across different systems and all becomes easier.
Hello and welcome back to AI Connect, the show where we discuss data analytics and artificial intelligence. Now, as we know, data has increasingly become the lifeblood of enterprise decision making and innovation. Keeping that in the perspective, we recently launched a 3-part series focusing on how certain organization is investing on dedicated data centers of excellence. On the first episode, we looked at how organizations are structuring their data organizations and also the evolving role of chief data officers. Today, we will look into the operational backbone of data centers of excellence, including the key building blocks of a data organization, such as the talent team, the governance framework, and also the measurement impact, which essentially transforming a traditional data organization, which was more of a cost center, to transforming it to a truly a profit center, basically, which is driving innovation and growth. To talk about that and more, I have Anirban Majumdar, who is the co-founder of Prescience. Anirban will share his insights in terms of how enterprises are structuring their data team for the maximum business impact. Now, Anirban, glad to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jaydeep.
So, let's dive in and talk about the first aspect. Now, many organizations are moving away from the legacy data team and investing on dedicated data centers of excellence.
Right.
Now, what is the fundamental difference between the old model and the new model? Can you shed some light on this?
Yeah, sure. So earlier, I would say even now in many enterprises, there's a standard data team, which in many cases it's under the CIO's organization, which is only related to ensuring that all the data is brought in, stored somewhere, and then archived and all those things. But the data team may not have the bandwidth or the capability to figure out how do we ensure that this data is used to provide higher benefits to the company beyond the regular storage and archival requirements. And so for the IT team, the data team in IT, the data fields and all being stored, they may not know how that makes sense to a finance team or the sales team or the logistics team. So which is why it is very essential that there is a central data team which will have access and have the view of overall data, the sphere in this company, and then they figure out, okay, how do we ensure that we get more value across different functions, across different geographies of this data. So that's where companies are slowly moving into the centralized data organizations, and there we have now so many companies including most of the Fortune 500 ones having chief data officer, right, which is now no longer a small part of the CIO organization, but in many cases it may be reporting to CIO or someone else, but it is a separate, distinct organization, and that's where the data COE or data organization comes in today.
Got it. Got it. So it's a good segue to probably the second point that I wanted to ask you is as organizations set up dedicated data centers of excellence, often there is a debate in terms of where does that organization sit inside the larger org, and what would be the reporting chain and so on. And looking ahead, how will that how would the data center of excellence cater to interdepartmental requests?
Right.
What's your viewpoint on that? What do you think it really works in your experience?
So we have seen different models out there, but I would like to think that it also depends on the kind of organization you are, right? So I would like to create, say, like there will probably in the three large buckets you can put these organizations in terms of their data generation, data consumption habits, right? So at one end you have all this, e-commerce or fintechs and those kind of companies, the real technology-based companies, which are more or less running on data. Without data, these companies are dead, right? So there is one set of companies like this. Then you have the more traditional enterprises. Even there are certain companies which have more data and they need to do more, okay, with that data to compete in this world. Like say your retail, your banks, your financial services, right? So these are the companies, or even pharma. So they have a lot of data, they generate a lot of data on a daily basis, and they have to figure out what all they can do so that they are always in the race and we're winning the race. The third one are more traditional, say manufacturing and other companies will be there, or government organizations where you are not generating that much data. So, but you also still need the data to compete in this world. But again, that amount of data being generated on a regular basis, daily basis, is not that high for them to, keep doing something with that on a regular basis. So if you look at this, then it makes sense for the third type of companies. It could be that the data organization can still be under the IT, or maybe the CFO or someone. It doesn't matter, but it can still work with that, right? But for the other two, it is very essential that these data organizations have a view of the full company, all the functions, horizontal, vertical, whatever way you want to cut and slice, dice this company. So they have to have that. So it makes sense to have it under the CEO, CEO, and provide it access to all the different departments, and that way they can provide value to all the parts of the company.
Got it. Does that change or has any dependency on company size, or irrespective to SMEs or large enterprise?
Yes, of course. So there are 2-3 different angles from which you have to look. One is the size of the company, right? That brings in complexity. Then multi-location companies bring in more complexity. Multi-country companies bring more complexity. Then business line companies bring in even more complexity. So you have different layers of complexity in the company, and the way it is done, and especially we have seen that more than anything, if a company is spread across multiple countries, that brings in the most amount of complexity, because you have so many different regulatory compliances and other things, right? So of course, so all these things make it even more imperative that you have a centralized data organization, so that they can take care of all these different aspects and ensure that the business user has the right data and the right insights in front of her.
Got it. And I think the other aspect of it is that looking at the specialization, right? I mean, even functional specialization, such as supply chain, such as logistics, such as marketing, sales. I think across these different functions, I mean, we can have maybe dedicated episodes on each of these.
Right.
In terms of how data centers of excellence can and are impacting basically decision making,
Right.
and innovation, right? Maybe that's something that we can probably take it up in, but I'm very curious to actually also maybe in one episode cover the functional
Right.
aspect of it, considering that I think Prescience has been working with different types of functions in the data organizations.
Right. Right.
That would be an interesting take on that.
Correct.
So coming back to again on the data centers of excellence, one interesting tension often in data center of excellence is whether to focus on standardization or whether to focus on innovation, right? And so in your opinion, like leading organizations, how do they balance between these two, right? Because both of them have their own importance, and standardization gives you basically scale, replicability, discipline, quality. While
Right.
innovation, of course, brings in your aspects and your way of sort of
Correct.
arranging, managing, and then applying data to drive insights and decision making. Right?
Absolutely. So I think that both are required, standardization and innovation in this organization. So standardization is required because what happens is when the data teams are spread across different functions or different geographies and all. So they went their own way, for example, in terms of the tools and technologies being used. So we have seen organizations, pretty large organizations, for example, for visualization, they're using Power BI, Tableau, Looker, all different types of things. Different teams are using different tools. So in such cases, bringing in standardization helps because say, ultimately these keep rolling up to certain level, right? And so then the same, senior executive, he can't be seeing one report in a Power BI dashboard in another in a Looker or something like that. So some amount of standardization has to be brought in, and how your report should be, and also it helps if you have a standardization, then integration of data across different systems and all becomes easier. So from a tool and technology perspective, yeah, it also makes sense to have some standardization. It also makes sense to have some standardization in terms of how do you do data governance, how do you measure and then ensure data quality, right? You cannot have different standards for different people for that. So you have to have a well-defined data governance plan. You have to identify who are the data stewards, who are the data owners, and ensure that they are doing the right set of things or getting the right set of things done to ensure the right quality data is getting into the company's data warehouses and data lakes, right? So those kind of things have to be, of a certain standard, so that everyone gains across the company. But then, as you mentioned, there are different things happening across different functions, right? So you cannot standardize that part. You should not try to standardize, but see what is the latest things happening, what are the different. For example, you have this agentic AI coming in a big way. Now there are certain processes where this can fit in very quickly, but then certain other processes where it may be a very difficult fit. So as you see an experiment and all, you figure out, okay, let me take up these 2 or 3 use cases, and this could be in finance, this could be in sales, customer support, and you try it out and see how you go ahead. So that kind of quick experimentation and then coming to a conclusion whether this is worth going further or stopping. So that also has to be part of the data COE.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. Switching gear from this to, I'm also curious to know what is the talent composition in traditional data organization, a data team versus, let's say, dedicated data centers of excellence. Do you see that there are any specialized roles that are evolving or are critical or are in sort of already in place? from our client interactions.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's happening. The change of pace is very rapid. So in the earlier traditional data teams, you would have primarily data engineers and some amount of folks who are more into BI and visualization kind of thing. But now we are seeing multiple different roles in the central COE, right? You still have the data engineers, but you also have a small set of people who are looking at the whole data governance, data quality thing along with them. Then you have the people who are, I would say, business analysts come insight generators, right? So they may be using some amount of dashboarding tools, but their primary job is to analyze data and provide insights to the different business executives in the company. So that's the second part. Then the third part comes in terms of the whole data science part of it. So whether it's Gen AI or traditional AI or any kind of work that you do, these are the people who are talking to business, understanding the requirements, building models, trying it out, and then finally coming up with some amount of models which can be taken to production. And finally, you have those analytics engineer or ML engineers who are taking it to production and also keeping the model refreshed on a regular basis. So that whole scope of data COE has moved from getting the data in from different sources to providing this model based predictions, recommendations, and generating different document summaries through LLMs, or it could be some traditional AI you build customer insights and all. So everything can come under this single data COE.
Got it, got it. So our organizations organically sort of training people internally to go and sort of perform on these different roles as we sort of see that space is evolving very quickly, or they increasingly depending on a larger team or larger ecosystem to support when they have a rapid sort of scale in their business to support that need, right?
Yeah, so growing organically, this whole data COE becomes very difficult, especially when you have newer roles coming in, you have newer tools and technologies coming in. So there's a lot of specialization which is happening in this whole space. So this is where what we have seen, companies who are really leveraging the power of data and the power of AI ML. They are building their own core team. They are also working with partners to do various things, right? So it's a very nice way they are combining the strengths of their own team and the partner teams and getting things done. And that is helping them to move much faster than they would have possibly done by trying to hire or train everyone on their own.
And without having to worry too much of operational overheads and so on.
Operational overheads, absolutely.
Right. Awesome. I think this is all I wanted to cover in this episode. So far we have covered in the first episode how leading organizations are structuring their data organizations and the evolving role of the chief data officer.
Right.
Today we discussed more of an operational backbone of how the data organizations are run and what are typically the composition of the skill sets. What are we looking for the next? I mean, I think one, we can probably look at the functional aspect of it. Anything else you have in mind that probably will add value to our audience who are either looking to set up a data center of excellence or probably looking at opportunities within data center of excellence from maybe even job perspective?
Yeah, so I think we can look at 2 or 3 key success factors to ensure that data COEs succeed, and then also look at how different functional aspects and how different other aspects can be taken care of within the same data COE, which will ensure that the different business functions can get what they expect from the data team.
Got it. Excellent. So I think we have a nice couple of topics to cover in the coming episode. But for today, we are going to wrap up here. Thanks for joining us, and we will continue to do this Data Center of Excellence series We'll appreciate your feedback, comments on our YouTube channel. And if there is any suggestion that you have, please share with us. Thank you very much once again for joining AI Connect, and we'll come back soon with a new episode.
Thank you.